After months of hostilities, a deal for a temporary end to the hostilities between Israel and the Lebanon-based militant group Hezbollah could be agreed in the coming hours. Israel's cabinet will meet to discuss backing the agreement, which has been brokered by international mediators, including the US and France. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is said already to have agreed to the deal in principle. Well, under the agreement, there would be a 60-day pause in fighting, during which Israeli troops would withdraw from southern Lebanon. Hezbollah would move further away from Israel's northern border so that civilians could return to their homes in their respective areas. In their absence, the Lebanese Army would deploy in areas close to the border. Other than that, the Lebanese government doesn't seem to be directly involved. It has earlier said that any deal should include the terms of the UN Security Council resolution, which ended the 2006 fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. But both sides say the other never fully respected that agreement. Well, despite the diplomacy, there's been no end yet to the fighting. This footage shows the aftermath of Hezbollah rocket attacks near Nahariya in northern Israel. 2 people were injured, one of them seriously. Officials in Lebanon say 12 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in the city of Tyre. Government officials say more than 7,300 people have been killed in Israeli attacks across Lebanon since October last year, with the majority of those deaths coming in the last few weeks. We'll have the latest from our correspondents in the region in just a moment. But first, Hugh, here's the US State Department's update on those ceasefire talks.
We have made significant progress with getting towards a resolution. That includes progress from where we were when I spoke to this last week, but we're not done yet. We're pushing as hard as we can to get a diplomatic resolution that would allow these tens of thousands of people in Lebanon and Israel to return home. But ultimately, that's up to the parties, not to us.
Well, the BBC's Hugo Bashega is in Beirut and Yolande Nell in Jerusalem. I spoke to them and asked Yolande for details on when the Israeli cabinet is due to meet.
Cabinet is not supposed to meet for an expected vote until much later this afternoon. But, we've had these positive sounds coming from Beirut, also from the White House overnight, with a spokesman saying that a deal appears to be close. Nothing is being said officially by the Israeli government. But, there are reports in the Israeli media that the Security Cabinet is expected to vote in favour of this 60-day truce plan. And I should point out that, this actually does resemble very closely the UN Security Council resolution, which ended the war in 2006 between Israel and Hezbollah. But this time there would be a lot more international support to try to make sure that that resolution is fully implemented, so that you would have the Lebanese Army filling in along the border with Israel in southern Lebanon, and a lot more international peacekeepers there as well. We're not getting told publicly what the contents are and all the fine details of this, but Israel's declared war goal is to be able to return about 60,000 of its own citizens who've been displaced by fighting across that border over the past year back to their homes. And the message that has come from the prominent mayors of some of those towns is that they are not reassured by the plan that they've been hearing about. One said that this was breaking in the middle of the Israeli campaign, and this could also expose some divisions within Israel's coalition government, where we've had the likes of the National Security Minister, the far-right Itamar Ben-Gvir, saying that it's not too late to stop this agreement. The war should go on, he said, until absolute victory.
Yolande, what has changed to make this potentially a palatable option for the Israeli government, especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, definitely there's a lot of pressure that is coming from the outgoing Biden administration, which has, failed, of course, to deliver a ceasefire in Gaza, despite months of efforts there, and negotiations currently frozen on that front. Washington does believe a diplomatic solution is very possible when it comes to Lebanon. And what's also changed, domestically, it is worth mentioning that this government very much wants to pass a new law on military conscription. That is because it wants to have exemptions for the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community really sort of clearly laid out there. There's pressure coming from the ultra-Orthodox parties within the coalition government on the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's very hard for him to push through a law like that when there's so much pressure on Israeli combat soldiers with the ongoing ground offensive in Lebanon. So that is considered to be really, part of the thinking that's going on as well about closing down this war in the north.
Hugo, to you in Beirut, as Yolande was saying, we don't know the exact details of the proposed deal, but what does it mean on the ground?
Yeah, Karin, I think there are two main things here. So as Yolande was saying, this proposal is basically based on the terms of the United Nations Resolution 1701, but there will be more international support to monitor the implementation of this deal. There will be a committee led by the Americans to monitor this deal on the ground. And also, there will be a letter, apparently, being signed by the Americans giving Israel the right to act inside Lebanon if Hezbollah is perceived to be in violation of this deal. This is something very controversial here in Lebanon because this is seen as a violation of the country's sovereignty. But obviously, I think, especially outside Hezbollah's support base, there is overwhelming support for a deal. Many people see this war as a war that, Hezbollah dragged this country into a war that was not in the country's interest, that this war didn't have to happen. But I think even among Hezbollah supporters, I think there is a lot of support for a deal because 1 million people have been displaced in this country. Most of those people from areas controlled by Hezbollah. There has been widespread destruction in the south, in the east, also here in Beirut's southern suburbs, which are areas essentially controlled by Hezbollah. So there is, I think, a lot of pressure internally as well for a deal to be signed. There have been, reports of progress, of, some optimism here in Lebanon that a deal is possible to put an end to more than a year of conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. But I think the key detail here is about implementation and also how the Lebanese military is going to be deployed in the south of the country. Lebanese military officials have been saying that they simply don't have the ability to confront Hezbollah. They need more international support, that I think there will be more international funding as well for the Lebanese military. But again, positive signs that a deal is possible, but we're still not there yet.
Hugo, thank you. To you, Yolande, just briefly, what's been the reaction so far from the families of the hostages that are still in Gaza with this effective separation of the war on Israel's northern front from the war on its southern front in Gaza?
Yeah, that is a division that has been increasingly apparent over the past few weeks. Of course, originally Hezbollah was saying that it would not stop its fighting until there was a ceasefire in Gaza. And indeed, that is why Hezbollah said that it was beginning to fire rockets just after the 7th of October attacks led by Hamas last year. It said it was in support of Hamas and in support of the people in Gaza. For the hostage families, we have seen in recent days, a lot of expressions of despair from them, particularly over the weekend with reports coming from Hamas that there was one of the female hostages that was in captivity in the north that had been killed. We haven't got more details on that, but this is, something that does really highlight the failure of progress on the Gaza front. Qatar, the regional mediator, has actually said that it is not going to resume negotiations between the two sides until both show that they're ready to make concessions.